All right, welcome back to One Bills Live, hour number 3. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you on a Buffalo Victory Monday after the Bills' 27-21 win over the New England Patriots. And joining us now, as he does every Monday after Bills games, is my broadcast partner, Eric Wood, on the Bills Radio Network, also the host of the Centered on Buffalo podcast. All right, Eric, as we assessed at the end of it yesterday, not the prettiest victory. Defense had a large hand in helping Buffalo regain the lead after losing it early. Instrumental, quite frankly, in giving the offense the opportunity to score points on short fields. Where do you come down on this performance in terms of the 4-game winning streak? Does it fall in line with some of the other grinded-out victories? Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the key is to get the win. I feel like these last couple games could have been a lot easier. You have two teams that have already been eliminated from the playoffs, and you let them get up early on you. And we talked in the pregame the last 2 weeks that one of the keys, especially with the team that's already mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, is to jump on them early. And the Bills did the opposite in both weeks. They fall down 10-0 to the Chargers. They fall down 7-0 really quick yesterday, just a few seconds in the game on the kick return for a touchdown by New England. And so, you know, they made it a lot tougher on themselves. Now they showed some resiliency, some grit. There were a lot of positives that come out of both of those games the last 2 weeks. And, you know, in a season that you dropped a lot of ugly, close games, you showed the last couple weeks that you can win those games, but they sure could have made it easier on themselves. But look, this time of the year especially, there's no style points. It's get the win and move on. The Bills needed that win. They had to have it yesterday, and they got it. And look, do you need to play a cleaner game likely this week down in Miami? Yes, but you got out of the game yesterday with the win, and that was ultimately what was most important.
Yeah, it's crazy too because it's easy because we sit here and you know we all ride the emotional roller coaster with this team, and it's been it's been like take me now, Lord, right? I mean, I can't stand it anymore, right? So, but you think about it, they're undefeated. We were just talking about this in the control room. They're undefeated with Joe Brady. They're undefeated in regulation with Joe Brady as their offensive coordinator. You've won 5 out of your last 6, and the only loss was to the NFC champion Philadelphia Eagles in overtime on the road, and at the time they were the 1 seed in the NFC. It's hard to poke holes in the big picture, but man, oh man, when you're sitting down here where the rubber meets the road, it's hard to get any traction, right? I mean, you're sitting there going, man, we can't make anything positive out of this. And yet, like I said, they've won 4 in a row against this stretch was a killer. It was the Jets with their defense. It was the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Patriots, all these teams that have notoriously either given the Bills problems or are having a great season.
Right. And even with the Chargers game, not that you want to justify any of the mistakes they made in that game, but you had 6 days to prepare for a team that had 9 days to prepare with an interim head coach, and you're traveling all the way to the West Coast. There was some understanding. Yesterday was a little bit more baffling, other than the fact that New England has won 2 out of their last 3 games and has been playing really well on the defensive side of the football. Denver's defense hasn't been awful this year. They come into Buffalo and get a win this year, and New England beats them at Denver to eliminate them last week. And so that was a Patriots team playing with some pride. And look, they caught some energy early, especially when they ran that kickoff return back for a touchdown. And you got guys there like Christian Barmore that are playing really well up front, that are playing for contracts. And yes, they're mathematically eliminated, but there's a lot of guys within that organization that have a ton of pride, and they're playing for their futures in this league. But yes, to your point, this was not the easiest stretch. There was easier stretches of the season when you look at some of the opponents that the Bills played throughout this season, but they've found ways to win, especially here as of late. And, you know, as we look at this, and I'm sure we'll get into it, if the passing game could get going, and look, New England comes in with the number 1 run defense in the NFL, 2nd in yards per game, 1st in yards per carry, in probably the best run defense in the NFL. You would have loved to see the Bills be able to light them up in the passing game yesterday, and there's a number of reasons as I tried to make sense of it to myself of why that didn't happen. And look, you missed that one play to Diggs down the field, or else Josh goes for over 200. It doesn't look quite as bad, but as you go back and look at the film, sure, there's plenty of mistakes. But, Josh Allen starts that game yesterday 1 for 8. And in the passing game, they just looked completely out of sync. They have a sack fumble on the first play of the game. The protection struggled early in the game, whether it was simply a 4-man rush and getting beat in one-on-one matchups, or it was unblocked defenders where the Bills couldn't identify the blitzes. There was drops early in the game. There was, whether it's misfires by Josh or miscommunication on the outside, it was tough to make sense of. And then, they tried to set up screens that time, and I thought the blocking in front of those screens was awful yesterday. And whether that was New England recognizing it and, formation recognition and being prepared for it, but it just wasn't there. And then I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Stephon Diggs right now. In his first 9 games of the season, 7 touchdowns, averages 92 yards a game and 11.9 per catch. The last 7 games, just 1 touchdown, 37 yards per game and 8.7 per catch. Now, was that production that he was showing early in the season going to last the entire season? Likely not. Teams are going to adapt. They're going to put more resources on him and try and take him out of the football game each week. But, his snap count is just going down. It seems it's going down. I'm not sure if that's, load management on a veteran receiver at this point of the year. But, they start that second half yesterday, and he's not out there at all for their touchdown drive. The next possession, we make note that he's back in the game. They take the shot. He's open down the field, unable to come down with the deep shot. And then the next 2 plays, he's out of the game. And so to me, there's something going on there. And when your number one receiver, isn't getting that production, whether that's coming from Josh or Diggs or the play calls, that's really affecting this pass game.
Right. And so as they get set for this week, there's a lot of fixing that has to get done there. And it seems like there may need to be a greater emphasis on Joe Brady's part to help scheme guys open, especially if you have a Stephon Diggs who may not be, for whatever reason, 100% based on the cumulative effects of playing all these snaps over the course of a 17-game season. What are we coming up with for solutions? Do we have to run more rub routes? Are you stacking receivers? Are you lining a receiver up in the backfield to create automatic separation? What does Joe Brady have to come up with this week to try to get easier answers for separation early in the down so Josh can get rid of the football?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of everything you said. When I look at the positives since Joe Brady's taken over in the pass game, I thought he's done an incredible job at times of attacking matchups and man-to-man defense. It's those wheel routes with Cook. It might be Kincaid over the middle of the field. Whatever those matchups are that he sees each week, he's done a great job at attacking those versus man coverage. I feel like versus zone, he's done a great job of sending Cook out wide and getting that 4-strong look. So there's bodies out in front of him if they do throw the swing, and then it's either been Kincaid or it's been Dawson Knox over the middle. And those have been, stealing yards across the middle of the field. But beyond those outside receivers have really not produced outside of Gabe Davis versus the Chargers, where he takes the top off the defense one time and had a couple nice catches in that game, but the outside production isn't there. So yes, it probably could be a combination of all of those. And then, and this is talking about the run game, but I think you could get to some RPOs. As this run game has really taken off for the Bills, I think they can get back to some more of those RPO concepts that we saw more under Brian Daboll, some more last year. They took some of those out to start this season, but, as teams have to fully respect this Bills run game, and as soon as those guys start pulling up front these last 2 weeks, those linebackers are flying downhill. And so I think you could get back to some of that RPO game to just get Josh in a rhythm early. And then, it's some of it's just simply first down production, not gaining the proper rushing yards on first down. It's a screen that goes for a -4. It's a sack on first down. And then that forces you into predictable pass situation, which is tough on the guys up front. And then it allows the defensive coordinator to get really creative against you.
Give us an insight as to what happens when you start, and now you got Joe Brady, you got like a half a dozen games under his belt. Teams are getting a feel for what the Bills are, just like you said. They're pulling those tackles, and teams are starting to respond to that. Give us an idea of this week as Joe Brady and they approach the playoffs. Got to win this to get in for sure, and we'll know more, of course, on Sunday night. But thinking this is going to be a win and in, got to get there game. What goes into the conversations for the coaching staff and the players when you're in these meetings about, okay, guys, listen, we're going to have to make a philosophical shift here. We're going to start putting in these RPOs because here's what we're seeing. Give us an idea about the insight into those conversations and getting guys on board with like a different kind of philosophy you're going to have to play with now to win games.
Yeah, and I don't think it's got to be a major philosophical shift. And look, the RPOs were likely just installed in OTAs and training camp. They have a lot of time under task with those. They just haven't got to as much of those, especially since Joe Brady has been the offensive coordinator. And so this week, I'd imagine similar to a bye week where you go back and self-scout. Well, Joe Brady takes over around that time, so there wasn't a whole lot of self-scouting on him. But as you look at these last weeks, you look back and say, okay, what worked, what didn't? Okay, what really worked? What are some complementary concepts that we can throw off of that? I thought they did a nice job yesterday of when at times they were predictable that they were going to go up the middle. They had some success with the toss cracks, go hit the edges there, whether it was designed or not. Josh Allen off the read play pitches the ball out to Shakir with the option play. I'm not saying we need to do that each and every week, but it's complementary concepts to what he's shown on film, whether it's that 4-strong look where it's Gilliam or someone out in front of James Cook on a swing route. Okay, maybe it's not just Kincaid up the middle. Maybe there's another answer off of that. Maybe that tackle trap pull play that they've had so much success on. Maybe there's some different concepts off of that can still be complementary. But okay, now teams are really keying in on what Joe Brady's had success with. Now what can we do off of it?
All right, let's take it a step further. Bills-Dolphins, Sunday night. The last regular season game of the year. Both teams will know quite literally what is at stake by the time they get there because all of the other teams will have played their games, including the ones that could impact a Buffalo playoff berth with a loss. But you're Mike McDaniel, Eric, and you're already in. And you're playing for the difference between the 2 seed and the potential of at least 2 home playoff games versus seed number 6 and going on the road to Kansas City. You got a beat-up football team that's licking their wounds after yesterday. How do you handle that?
Yeah, you got to go out and try and win this game because hosting playoff games is a major deciding factor. It is tough on the road. I only played in 1 playoff game in my career, but I played multiple games in Jacksonville throughout my career, and there was nothing like the atmosphere that we played in down in Jacksonville in early 2018 after the 2017 season. And so I'd assume that they're going to go all in and try and win that game. They are very beat up. They've been just ravaged by injuries these last few weeks with Tyreek Hill missing time and Waddle and Mostert last week. And then the defensive side of the ball with Phillips and Chubb and Baker. Xavier Howard. It's unbelievable. Their offensive line is banged up, but you got to go out and try and win this football game because it's a major difference when you can get that 2 seed. And so I expect Miami, whether it's, no matter how it shakes out, they're going to give the Bills all they can handle, and they're going to come out. And I never got to play back in the day, the Bills-Dolphins rivalry. That's all I heard about when I got to Buffalo. But by that time, New England owned the division, and we were all looking up at them, and we were all chasing them at all times throughout my career. Tom Brady was in the division every single year of my career, and they won it every single time. And so that was who we were chasing, and I'm excited to get back into this Bills-Dolphins rivalry, and Hard Rock Stadium is going to be lit up this week. It's going to be absolutely incredible. The first time they played down there this season, I don't want to say it was a 50-50 crowd, but the Bills Mafia was in full force, last year, full force down there. I'm excited to see how many tickets they can swipe right now. My buddies were looking at tickets on Ticketmaster last night, and the get-in price was $800 a piece. And so I'd assume that comes down a little bit, but I'm interested to see how many how many tickets, and maybe they've already been bought up by majority of the Bills fans already.
One last thing for me, the interesting part about this end of the season, and you always run into this, there's one of these teams like Baltimore this year who's kind of run off and left it, and they've got the 1 seed sewn up, but they're playing Pittsburgh this week. And a lot of people have said, and I kind of disagree with this, about giving guys a week off or something and they're going to get rusty and all that. And I said, at this point, there's no way. You give the guys the time off, and if you can sit down Lamar Jackson and you sit down all your you only have so many guys you can sit down, right? Because it's a small roster. But I am of the mind you're not going to get rusty in 2 weeks. You're not going to get rusty in 3 weeks, particularly when you're in the building every day practicing. In my mind, Baltimore needs to get as healthy and as fresh as they can possibly do, which means resting as many guys for as long as they can until week one of the playoffs. What are your thoughts on what Baltimore is thinking about going into Pittsburgh or having Pittsburgh come to them? Or maybe it is in Pittsburgh. I don't know which one. But your thoughts about this game, Pittsburgh-Baltimore, and how Baltimore should handle it with absolutely nothing on the line.
Yeah, I think you rest as many guys as you possibly can. You cannot risk any injury in that game. Now, there's going to be a number of young guys out there for Baltimore that are starters because, the rosters, like you mentioned, just aren't that big in the NFL. You have 53 guys, 45 active on game day, but I can't imagine that Lamar Jackson will be in uniform on Sunday or Saturday or a number of their other starters. But there will be some of the starters out there, but you're trying to avoid risk of injury to as many of your star players as you can. And as big as the physical rest at this point of the season, the mental rest as well. Guys that know that they're not going to be in uniform this week, they don't have to fully mentally prepare and dive into a game plan and the countless hours of film. Lamar Jackson, the amount of time that he's putting in at the facility each week as a starting quarterback in the NFL, especially playing at that level, is an absolute astronomical amount of hours. And so for him to be able to pull back on that, at least for a week, and then, next week, they'll have an idea of, one of two opponents that they'll be facing when they get their first game in the playoffs after the bye. So, physically, mentally, they've earned it. They've earned the opportunity to recharge. And, you talk about a complete team, offense, defense, special teams, they've played well this entire season. And you know what? I don't think they're head and shoulders above the rest of the conference. And when I look at, how could the Bills match up against the Ravens, that wouldn't be a matchup that I would be in fear of per se. I think they match up across the board well with them. The Bills just haven't been able to play complementary football. It's one side of the ball shows up or the special teams lets them down, for a number of weeks. And then you have the games like Dallas and Miami early in the season where they put it together and they can blow out teams too.
Here's the thing, too. Describe the mindset of all those young guys on the roster, the backups, all the guys that all week know, say, listen, you're going this week in a game we win. It's a division game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Describe how motivating it is for the rest of the Baltimore roster to go into this game knowing that it's a division game and it does mean something to the Steelers.
Oh yeah, they'll be fired up. That is as bitter of a rivalry as there is in the NFL. They're not looking to just give the Steelers the game. Now, if I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it from Baltimore's front office, the guys in the locker room are going to go out and compete and they want to go win that game. Same with the coaching staff. If I'm in the front office, I might be thinking to myself, if the Steelers win this game and Buffalo somehow doesn't lose to Miami, I think Buffalo, and I know this is likely a biased opinion, but is the first or second best team in the AFC. And, if you lose this game to the Steelers, you give them a chance to squeak in and get in front of Buffalo and keep them out of the playoffs. So there might be some people in the organization that wouldn't mind losing this game to the Steelers, but those guys that are getting their opportunity, some of them for the first time to get serious action, heck, these guys are, playing for future contracts. They're playing for potential starting jobs within the organization as people become free agents. And so these guys, they'll be giving it their all out there. And, it's going to be a road game for Pittsburgh. And look, if Huntley starts for Baltimore, you're playing, it's two backup quarterbacks out there. It's Mason Rudolph and Huntley. It's not this drastic mismatch, especially at the quarterback position.
Right.
All right, Eric, thanks very much as always. We'll see you down in South Florida this weekend.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Happy New Year, guys.